Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to 5 Minutes of Torah with the Rabbi. It has been another wonderful week for my family and me here in Sydney, Australia. Yer and Naomi continue to enjoy school, and as Avishai is studying on his own, he has taken up one new interest while we are here. This week, for the very first time, in the ocean behind me, he started to learn how to surf, and he really enjoyed it. It actually makes a lot of sense to learn how to surf, dafka, precisely this particular week, as this is the Shabbat of Parshat B'Shalach. This is the Shabbat in which the Israelites escape from Egypt, are sent out of their slavery by Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh changes his mind, and the Israelites are cornered at the Yam Suf, at the Sea of Reeds. They don't surf across the waters, no. Rather, they do something different from what Abishai learned, something that none of us really can do today. That is, Moshe, split the water for them so that they would be able to walk right through the water. Unfortunately, in life, we know that it's not always so simple, that there are times in which we have rocky waters, times in which the waves are a little too strong, a little too hard, and we can't necessarily just surf right on top of the water or simply walk right through it because Moses has led us through those waters. But rather, we need to hold on to something. We need to take ourselves through those difficult times. And I believe in this parasha, we find one of the ways that we can do this. In the Torah, it tells us that when the Israelites came out of Egypt, that they came out, Alu b'nei Yisrael, that they went up out of Me'eretz Mitzrayim, they went up out of the land of Egypt, chamushim, armed. It's quite an interesting word to be used here, and we don't exactly know what this means, that they came up armed. The Mechilta, a very early rabbinic text, tells us that they literally came out armed with weapons, so that when they would encounter those who hated them along the way, such as the Amalekites, they would have what with which to defend themselves. And Ibn Ezra, a Spanish medieval commentator, explains that chamushim means that they were armed with what they needed, so that when they would travel for the 40 years in the desert and the Midbar, they would be able to sustain themselves. And yet the Kli Yakar, a well-known and one of my favorite Czech commentators and rabbis from the 17th century, explains that chamushim means that they were armed with the bones of Yosef. In the sentence just prior to the fact that it tells us that the Israelites went up out of the land of Egypt armed, it also tells us that Moses fulfilled Joseph's request. And that is that he brought his bones with them as they left Egypt, as they escaped slavery. And the Kli Yakar goes on to explain that as the Israelites traveled in Egypt, they traveled with two arons. They traveled with the aron, with that which contained the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances of the Torah, and they traveled with the bones of Joseph. And he goes on to explain that the aron, that the ark that contained the bones of Joseph, were actually similar to that of the ark that contained the 10 Commandments. And that even though they didn't have the 10 Commandments until they made it to Har Sinai, the holiness of Joseph was equal. It is important for us to bring with us, wherever we go in life, the holiness of our tradition, not only of the Aseret HaDibrot, of the 10 Commandments, but of all of Torah and all of our Jewish law and tradition. And it's also important to bring with us our history, to bring with us the memory of those who came before us, to ensure that their acts of holiness will help us go through stormy waters, through challenging times, because it's not always so easy to just go above them or through them. Shabbat Shalom.